Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nicola. I'm from PEXA, and joining me for today's New South Wales webinar is Cyber and Vesna.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to our webinar for representing the incoming proprietor. Nicola will be presenting today and hopefully you find the webinar useful. There is a functionality where you can ask questions as we go and Vesna and I will be answering them. So I'm the team leader in New South Wales for settlement support and virtual training. We will try to answer as much questions as we can today. But if you do require assistance after this webinar and want to reach out to us for any questions or you need assistance with a matter that you've got and you'd like to settle on PEXA, please reach out. Our team email where you can reach out is teamnsw@pexa.com.au. So that's teamnsw@pexa.com.au and we will get in touch with you and assist where we can. Over to Nicola.
Thanks, Cyber. So everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Transfers 101, representing the incoming proprietor. Now, as Cyber just said, if you have any questions going throughout this webinar, please use the Q&A box to type your questions in there. You've probably realised you are all on mute, so you're not going to be able to ask any live questions. So please use that Q&A box at any point to answer any questions. We'll either answer them as we're going through, or if we run out of time, we'll answer them at the end of the session. So what's on the program today? We're going to look at what is PEXA and a brief overview of ARNEC and our compliance obligations. We'll have a look at PEXA Foundation, so some terminology and lingo. We'll then complete a transfer as the incoming proprietor. So this is the role that you would normally know as the purchaser. I'm going to direct you to the transfer guidelines, the bank transfer checklists, and we'll have a look at PEXA Certified and the community. So that's where we can go to get a whole lot of help material post this webinar. Now, please keep in mind that this webinar does focus on the steps to be completed by the incoming proprietor. Due to the large number of registrants, it is really important that we try to stick to this topic. So we'll be focusing solely on the steps to be completed by the incoming proprietor. So let's go back to basics and we'll have a look at what is PEXA. PEXA is an online settlement platform. It allows you to lodge land registry documents electronically, and if your matter involves a financial settlement as well, we can also help facilitate that financial settlement electronically. So we're transferring funds in an electronic manner as opposed to using bank checks. Now, PEXA is integrated with the State Revenue Office and the land registries in every state which we are live in, and that allows us to pull data from their system and for them to pull data from ours. And we need that exchange of information so that we can stamp our transfer as we would normally do when we're representing an incoming proprietor, and so that we can draw in data from a land title and then actually lodge our land registry documents with the land registry. Now, we can do lots of powerful things on this PEXA platform. Obviously, we can be lodging transfers, we might be exchanging funds. So it's quite important that we limit who can access the platform. And the only people that can usually subscribe to PEXA are financial institutions, legal practitioners, and licensed conveyancers. So in a nutshell, PEXA is allowing you to lodge land registry documents and settle the funds. ARNEC stands for Australian Registrar's National Electronic Conveyancing Council, and ARNEC is the regulator of PEXA and of all of its subscribers, so the subscribers being you. When you sign up to register for PEXA, you actually sign a participation agreement and you are then bound by some model participation rules. We call them the MPR. And the MPR and the participation agreement set out all of your compliance obligations. So what do you need to do in order to ensure you are compliant and can continue using the PEXA platform? If you are not familiar with the model participation rules, I would highly recommend that you have a look at them. You can download a full copy from the ARNEC website. So that's www.arnec.gov.au. The following graph is just showing us visually our compliance obligations and where they sit. So we have ARNEC at the top here, the regulator of PEXA, who sets all the rules. So they set out what do we have to do if we're going to use PEXA. When we sign up to PEXA, we sign a participation agreement which contractually binds us to a whole lot of obligations. So we are bound to follow the model participation rules. And essentially the participation agreement is an overarching agreement which ensures that you comply with privacy, confidentiality, liability, suspension, termination, insurance, disputes, and change management. It also ensures that you comply with the service charter, the privacy policy, the pricing policy, the security policy, and the digital certificate policy. So you can see that once we've signed this participation agreement, we have a whole lot of obligations that we need to make sure that we are on top of. Two compliance obligations which I'm going to call out in today's webinar are the VOI and the client authorization form. And these obligations come from the model participation rules. So Rule 6.3 of the Model Participation Rules says that a representative subscriber must use the client authorization form provided by ARNEC. You cannot use a client authorization form created by your firm. You can't make up your own client authorization. You must use the one provided by ARNEC. Now, the only time that you do not need a client authorization is if you are completing a caveat or a priority notice. A downloadable version of this client authorization form is available from the ARNEC website under Publications and Forms, and I will show you where that is in just a second. So our first requirement, we must have a client authorization form signed by the person we're representing. Rule 6.5 also says that we need to complete a verification of identity. So the subscriber must take reasonable steps to verify the identity of their client or each of their client's agents. The purpose is to reduce the risk of identity fraud and the registration of fraudulent land transactions. You can either apply the verification standard, which is provided by ARNEC and available from their website, or you can verify the client in some other way that constitutes taking reasonable steps. Again, there is lots of helpful material available on the ARNEC website, so we actually can go in and have a look at some guidance notes to help us understand this VOI process and how we can comply with it. Just to show you here, this is what the client authorization form looks like. And this is the example of the guidance note for verification of identity. And I'm going to take you to the ARNEC website now so that you can actually see for yourself where you can find this useful information. Because it's very, very important that we're keeping up to date with our compliance obligations and ensuring that we're complying. Now, questions always arise about the client authorization form and the VOI and what do we need to do with it. And you don't need to do anything with it. So once you've got that form completed and you've done the verification of identity, you just keep all of those documents on your file for auditing purposes. So there's no need to send any forms into the LRS. We're just keeping those forms on our file for auditing purposes. So I've just taken you to the ARNEC website and we can see here I'm at www.arnec.gov.au. So I would note that down if you're not familiar with this website. Under publications, we can see here that we can download a full copy of the model participation rules if we would like to. And I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but just to show you what it looks like. Hopefully we're already familiar with it, but it's really setting out a lot of our compliance obligations in here. Security, And there's even a copy of the client authorization form at the back of the model participation rules. So if you haven't already done it, download a copy of the model participation rules and have a read through. The other thing in publications, we have some very cool guidance notes. Okay, so if you're not sure about how to complete the verification of identity and you want more information, there are some guidance notes. So you can come in here and have a look. Okay, there's a guidance note on completing the verification of identity. So what is it? Why is it required? When is it required? And how do I actually complete it? So this is nice and easy to read. So that's our guidance note on verification of identity. So just showing you again, I went to publications, model participation rules, guidance notes. Now you'll also notice that there is a guidance note on the client authorization form. So if you're unsure about how to complete that client authorization form, you can download the guidance note. Okay, so you can see here how is it completed. Now just something to mention about the client authorization form. A lot of people ask, what happens if I have a repeat client? Do I have to get that form signed every single time they come in and instruct me? Well, no, you don't. That form, which is available under forms, can be completed as a standing authority. Okay, so a standing authority will last for 2 years until, unless it's revoked earlier. And that standing authority can last up to 2 years and keep it on your file with your verification of identity. And then for that 2-year period, you can just rely on this CAF instead of having your client sign a new one every single time. Okay, so here's our client authorization form, which is available for you to download and print off. There are sections that the client needs to complete. And then there are sections where the person who's completing the verification of identity, they need to complete the bottom section. And at the back are some useful, helpful tips. Okay, so a bit of a glossary. So just to show you where we got this form from, I'm on the ARNEC website, I went to publications and then down to forms. The other area that we looked at were the model participation rules guidance notes and the model participation rules. So if you're not already familiar, definitely have a look at the ARNEC website. It's where you're going to go for all of your compliance obligations. All right, we're going to move on from compliance and we're going to have a look at some PEXA foundations, some basic terminology and lingo. The first one is workspaces. In the paper world, when we get a new client come to our office and they instruct us to complete a transaction, we generally open up a new file for them. So we've got like some sort of manila folder open with a client name and number on there, and we file all of our documents, all of our correspondence into this file. Now in PEXA, we do something similar to that. When we get instructions to complete a transaction, we open up a workspace. So think of your workspace a little bit like your electronic file. And within the workspace, we complete all of our PEXA related tasks. So let's say we have been instructed to represent a purchaser. We open a workspace and we're going to be transacting with the land registry within that workspace. So we're going to draw data direct from the land title that we're dealing on. We'll be creating a transfer document and we'll be signing that document electronically on behalf of our clients. The reason we can sign the document electronically on behalf of our clients is because we have that signed client authorization form. If you don't have a client authorization form, you cannot complete transactions in PEXA and you cannot sign documents on behalf of anyone. The way that we sign our documents is usually using our digital certificate. So this is like our electronic pen and it comes with a matching PIN number. The two of those go hand in hand together. When we sign documents, we insert our digital certificate and we put in the matching PIN. So we're drawing in data in our workspace. We're creating and signing documents. We're potentially transacting with the State Revenue Office because we need to assess our transfer for stamp duty. And in most scenarios, not all, but in most scenarios, we'll need to invite other people to join us in that same workspace. So just like in the paper world where we have to get all the relevant parties together so that they can each create their particular document and do their part of the job, the same thing happens in PEXA. So if there are banks involved, we need to invite the banks into the workspace so that they can complete their mortgage and their discharge of mortgage. If there's a caveator on title, we potentially have to invite their representative into the workspace as well for the purposes of removing that caveat at settlement. So just think of it like in a normal paper transaction, we have to get all the relevant parties involved. In PEXA, we invite them into a workspace. Once everyone's in the workspace, we can have conversations and discuss the matter together in a secure environment. So once we are all in the workspace, we can communicate together and we can see visually what's been created and what steps have been completed within that workspace by each of the relevant parties. So just to recap, our workspace is a little bit like our electronic file. Our work groups are a little bit like electronic filing cabinets. So just like in the paper world, we would generally have filing cabinets for different teams. So we might have the family law team and their matters get filed into a filing cabinet. We might have the banking and finance team. Their files would get filed into that filing cabinet, and then perhaps we've got the property team. So the same thing can happen in PEXA. We can set up electronic filing cabinets, which are called work groups. And that means that the people who are in that team have access to the files in that work group. Okay, so in family law, we'll file all of our workspaces relating to our family law matters into this work group, and the people who will have access to the work group are Jane, Mary and John from the family law team. So it's kind of like they've got a key to the cabinet. All the banking and finance matters will get filed into the banking and finance work group. And the people that will have access to that work group can be Nancy, Mark and Tan because they're the people that are in that team. So they're the ones working on those matters. Same thing for property. We can limit access to that work group to Todd, George and Max. They're the people that work on the property files. So this is just an example of how we can set up work groups, i.e. little filing cabinets in PEXA so we can cleanly file our workspaces away and control who has access to those workspaces. Now before we go any further into transfers, I'll just pause there and see if anyone has any questions that they want to ask relating to our compliance obligations or our workspaces and work groups. All right, excellent. Looks like we're going to move on. So PEXA transfers. In PEXA, we will generally see these four parties in a transfer scenario. We will see a proprietor on title. That's the person representing the vendor. If there is a mortgage registered on the land title, we will also see someone in the role of mortgagee on title. So they're the bank that currently holds the mortgage. There will most definitely be an incoming proprietor, so that's the person representing the purchaser. And if that incoming proprietor is borrowing money from a bank to fund the purchase, well, they'll be inviting in an incoming mortgagee. So that's going to be the bank lending money to the purchaser. Now, we may see all of these roles in a transfer transaction. We might see only 3, we might see only 2, we might see more roles than this. It really just depends on your particular circumstance. What we're going to focus on today is a really basic scenario that involves a proprietor on title and an incoming proprietor. So we're going to have a transfer scenario that involves no banks. Now the good thing to know is if we can learn the steps of what we need to complete when there are no banks, well, we can easily still complete them if there are banks involved. There's not much difference, and what I'm going to do as we go through the session is just highlight any additional steps that you would need to do if there were banks involved in the transaction. Our transfer scenario for this exercise is Margaret and Maxwell Black have signed a contract to sell their property at 271 Ocean View Lane, Byron Bay, to William and Amanda Wakefield. The title is currently unencumbered and the Wakefields are purchasing in cash. So just to reiterate, this is a standalone transfer. Unencumbered title, purchasers paying in cash. There are no banks involved. Mr. and Mrs. Black are going to be represented by Kakadu Property Law, and William and Amanda Wakefield will be represented by Whitehaven Conveyancing Services. So we'll be focusing on the steps that Whitehaven Conveyancing Services need to complete. Now up on the screen here you can see a transfer flow chart. So this is showing us the high level steps. What do we need to complete in order to get this transfer ready for settlement? On the left hand side are the steps that the proprietor on title completes. On the right hand side, the steps the incoming proprietor completes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pretend for this exercise, and it's this exercise only, that the proprietor on title has already created the workspace. Now, don't worry, in the real world, anyone can open the workspace, so it's not as if only the proprietor on title can open it up. Anyone can. It can be the proprietor on title, it could be the incoming proprietor, it might even be the incoming mortgagee. Okay, one of those parties will open the workspace in the real world and invite in the relevant parties. In today's exercise, the proprietor on title has done it. Okay, they've already opened up a workspace and they have invited in the incoming proprietor. So we're actually going to start our steps as if we're going to accept an invitation into the workspace that Kakadu Property Law have created. We'll accept the invite, we'll review the land title details, and then we'll create our parties that we wish to represent, William and Amanda Wakefield. So what I'm going to do is to accept the invitation into the transfer workspace, we're going to go into the training environment as Whitehaven. Okay, so I'm logging in as Sam from Whitehaven Conveyancing Services, and I can see I have some invitations sitting here. So I'll click on invitations. Now just bear in mind, whenever your firm receives an invitation, they are also emailed a notification to alert them. So it's not like you have to be sitting here logged into PEXA all the time. You will receive an email notification to alert you you've been invited into a transaction. So these are all of my invitations. And the one that I'm concerned with right now is the one from Kakadu Property Law, jurisdictions New South Wales. They've invited me in as the incoming proprietor and the transaction involves a transfer. I can see the settlement date and time, and then I'll hit the view button to get some more information. So this is what the invitation will look like. Who's it from? The workspace ID is visible, the land title reference is visible, our client name, so that should really jog our memory. We should be alerted. Yes, we know who the Wakefields are, and any additional notes. So we can accept, decline, or forward to another subscriber. I'm going to accept this invitation and put in my reference, which is my workspace reference. So a bit like my matter number, my file name. So whatever you would call a file in the paper world, you can use that same naming convention for your reference. Work groups, we can see here that this is going to go into the primary default work group, but if you have other work groups set up, by all means put them into a different work group. And we're going to click this button, open the workspace upon acceptance, so that we go straight in there and start completing our tasks. We're now inside the workspace that Kakadu Property Law created and invited us into. We can see that the reference that I just entered in has come through up the top here. My workspace ID is a unique number given to this particular workspace. So it's a good idea to note that down and maybe write it on your file if you have a physical file in the office, so that if you need to call the support line, you have that workspace ID ready and visible. That's the first thing they'll probably ask you for. The property address is pulled through from the land title information. We can see the settlement date and time. At the moment it's not accepted because we haven't accepted it yet. We've got two bars here, a lodgement bar and a financial settlement bar. Both of these bars are currently in preparation, and if I hover over each of those, it brings out a little balloon to tell us what status they are in. So currently documents are in preparation and financial settlement is in preparation. And what we're going to be trying to do today is move these bars to the ready status so that our documents are ready for settlement and our financial settlement is also ready for settlement. And we were just on this homepage here, the dashboard area, just looking at our workspace summary. All right, so we've accepted our invitation into the workspace. One of the things that we need to do at the same time is accept the settlement date and time. So we can see here that the settlement date and time is saying not accepted. And we can also see the same thing on the left-hand panel here, not accepted. So there are a few ways that we can actually accept that settlement date and time, or if we don't like the time, we can propose a new one. So we can click on the outstanding task, or we can click on the left-hand panel here where the date is. Either of those are acceptable. So I'm just going to click on this outstanding task where it's nice and visible. And it'll take me to the accept or propose new settlement date and time screen. Currently proposed the 28th of Feb at 12 o'clock. Okay, it's pending my acceptance, so I haven't yet accepted it. And I can either accept this time, or if I don't like it, it's not convenient, I can propose a new one. Okay, so I'm just going to be nice and I'll accept the 12 o'clock start and hit save. Okay, so it's now been accepted. Let's have a look at our flow chart, because we have completed step 1, reviewed the invitation, accepted it, and accepted the settlement date and time. We're going to complete steps 2 and 3, reviewing the land title details and creating the parties, William and Amanda Wakefield. So we're going to navigate down this left-hand panel. Right underneath Workspace Summary, we can see land titles. So I'll click on that, and what I want to do here is review the data that has come through from the land registry. So I'm going to be checking the address, the estate type, the proprietors. Now there is no mortgage details appearing here because there is no mortgage registered on this title. Remember, it's an unencumbered title. In the real world, if there is a mortgage or a caveat registered on title, they will be appearing on this screen, so you'll be able to see the details. Now, at the start of every matter, you are still required to do a full title search, which is what you probably do at the commencement of your matters anyway. You still continue to do that with your PEXA matters because the information displaying here is not a full title search. Okay, so you're just checking off the data. Now down the bottom here we have perform title activity check. So one of the things that we get when we settle through PEXA is periodic checks on the title. So it will pick up any activity that has happened, whether it's good, bad or otherwise. So the first check that's done is when we open the workspace, it'll check the title for the preceding 60 days. Has anything been registered or has been any activity? And the response has come back negative. That means nothing has happened. There's been no activity. If there has been activity, it will say positive, and our firm will be emailed a notification and alerted that there has been activity on the title. So when we open the workspace, it does a check for the preceding 60 days. When we're 1 month away from settlement, it'll do a check for us every week. If there is any activity on the title, it will say positive and will be emailed and notified. When we're 1 week away from settlement, it'll do this check every day for us. And on the day of settlement, it'll do one final check 55 minutes before settlement is due. Okay, if at any point it picks up activity, remember you will be emailed and notified. So there are our title activity checks. We'll just scroll to the top of this screen and just highlight the blue button, Add Land Title. If your transaction involves multiple land titles, let's say you've got an apartment with a car bay on a separate land title, or maybe it's rural land, you can add the additional land titles using the blue button. So all we really need to do at this stage is review that data. Everything's looking as we expect. I'm going to move down to participants and create my parties, William and Amanda Wakefield. So you can see here I'm Whitehaven and I don't have any parties. Kakadu have already come in and successfully represented the proprietors, Mr. and Mrs. Black. So to create my parties, I'm going to use this big blue button on the right hand side, Create a Party. Make sure it says I represent this party. They're not a panel master and they're not a frequently represented party, so I can just leave that as not applicable. Their role has come through as incoming proprietor, and I now need to put in their party details. So their full legal name, even though it says optional next to the last name, it's their full legal name. So you've done your verification of identity, you will have their full legal name. It's only optional if people legitimately do not have a last name. Family name order, so this is asking us, does the family name come first or last? There's an information eye there, click on it because it gives you information. So if you're not sure what it's asking you, click on it. Name suffix is optional, so it will only be if it's applicable to your matter. So a name suffix is not Mr. or Mrs. It's things that go after the name, junior, senior, PhD, OBE, things like that. Again, if you see an information eye, click on it to get some further information. The date of birth is mandatory, so you can see it doesn't say optional there, so we do need to put in their date of birth, and remember we've done our VOI, so we have that information. Party capacity is optional and it's not relevant in today's scenario, so they're not going on to the title as any of these. So I'm just going to leave that completely blank. The tick box underneath here relates to a different program called PEXA-Key. So PEXA-Key is an app where you can invite your clients to join this app, and they can then use that app to track their settlement. So they'll just be sent very general information statuses about where the matter is at, things like your settlement's 7 days away. On the day of settlement, it'll tell them that settlement's due at a certain time, and when settlement's taking place, they'll be alerted that settlement has started. When settlement's completed, they'll be notified via this app as well. So it's just so that they can be in the loop as to the status of their settlement. So if you wanted to use that app, you would tick the box and then put in their phone number, and they'll be sent an SMS inviting them to join PEXA-Key. More information about PEXA-Key is available on our PEXA community, so I would encourage you to have a look there because we will not be covering PEXA-Key in this webinar. Address details for our clients, it says entering address information here is optional. So we can, if we want to, put in our client's address using the blue button. So we can type in the address here and hit save. But I'm not going to do that today because address details are optional for our clients. So they will not appear in the transfer as mandatory fields. So if you want to add them in, by all means you can, but if you do add them in, then they will be visible on the transfer and other people will be able to see them. And for some people, they don't want that to happen, so they don't enter them in. So I'm going to leave the address details and I'm just going to hit the save button. And I'm now married up with Amanda Wakefield. I'm going to quickly do the same thing for William, and then we will stop and see if anyone has any questions. Now at this point in time, I'm married up with my clients, William and Amanda Wakefield. They're the incoming proprietors. If they were borrowing money from a bank, while I'm on this screen, I would invite that bank into the transaction. So I would come up to the top here and say invite participant. I would put in the bank's name, so who am I inviting in? Their role would be incoming mortgagee. And you can see data populates from the workspace. Put in the customer account or loan number and any additional notes and hit send invitations. Okay, so put in the participant name, their role is incoming mortgagee, fill in the relevant details and hit send. So that's the only extra step that you would have to do at this stage if there was an incoming mortgagee, which in this scenario there is not. Okay, so we've got a question about entering in details if it is a company or an organisation. So in that scenario, if I go to create a party, under the party details, I can select organisation and then I just need to fill in the relevant details. So I pick an organisation type, put in an ACN, whichever one is relevant here. And again, you can enter in the address. Okay, so it's the same thing, except this time we're just selecting organisation and filling in the mandatory fields. Now we also have the question about what do you do if the incoming mortgagee is not on PEXA? So if it's an ADI, they will have to be registered for PEXA to complete transactions. So it's unlikely that you would find an ADI not registered for PEXA. If it's a private mortgagee, let's say we're borrowing money from mum and dad, if that mum and dad party is represented by a lawyer or a conveyancer, then they will have to complete the transaction in PEXA. It's only if they are self-represented that the matter can proceed in paper. Okay, so we have got all of our parties in the participant screen. Okay. Remember, if we need to invite in any other parties, like an incoming mortgagee or a caveator on title, we use the blue invite participant button.
Before we proceed, I would like to address another question that we had earlier. We did answer it earlier, but just going back to that, so there's been a few questions regarding do you still need to do a final search before a settlement in PEXA? Now, we covered the title activity check. We do a title activity check 1 hour before your settlement, so that's 55 minutes before your settlement time. That will come back with a positive or a negative result. So negative means there's been no change on your title since the last time that we checked. If it is a positive result, that means there has been either a dealing that's been lodged or a dealing that's been withdrawn, and you will get a notification so you can log in, have a look at what it is and do your required searches. In terms of actually doing a final search or not, we're not able to answer that question for you because we can't advise you. It is up to you. If you have an incoming mortgagee, they will not ask you for a final search anymore if it is a PEXA settlement. There are still a lot of people that do a final search to be 100% sure. That's completely up to you and your internal business processes. The only thing that the title activity checks and our land title pages don't cover is writs in New South Wales. Other than that, it will show all the caveats, withdrawal caveats, any priority notices, anything, any other dealings. So I suppose it's up to you to decide whether you'd still like to do a final search or not.
Great, thank you, Cyber. We'll move on from participants at this stage. Just remember, if you have other participants that you need to invite into the workspace, you use the invite participant button on the participants page. So if someone needs to withdraw a caveat, you need to invite in their representative so that they can create the withdrawal of caveat document. Just like you do in a paper scenario, every relevant party has to be part of the transaction so that they can create their relevant document. If the party is not represented by a lawyer or conveyancer, then that may fall into one of the exceptions whereby you can potentially complete the entire transaction in paper. So I would have a look at the LRS website because they have on there a list of all the eligible transactions and what is an exception and what is not. So what have we done so far? We have come into the workspace, checked the land title details. We've created our parties, William and Amanda Wakefield. We didn't need to invite in an incoming mortgagee, but I did show you how to do that using the invite participant button. Now that we've got all of our parties in the workspace, we'll prepare our transfer document and edit the notice of sale. We'll then proceed to complete our stamp duty. So from participants, I'm going to come down to documents. And in the document screen is where we complete all of our documents. So even if there are multiple parties in this workspace, everyone comes to this screen to complete their documents. So I'm going to complete a transfer. The title is pulled through, so we just want to double check that title. Is this transfer a part tenancy? No, it is not. So a part tenancy would be if maybe only Maxwell was selling his share of the property to the Wakefields and it wasn't a transfer of the whole property. Our transferor details have pulled through and we can see here address details are optional. Our tenancy details, so for our clients William and Amanda Wakefield, are they going to own the property as joint tenants or would they like it to be tenants in common? So you just use that little drop down box to select which option is applicable. And then if you wanted to, you can change the shares around. Okay. So you can put in those shares as applicable to your matter, or it might just be joint tenants. Our transferee details have pulled through. Again, it's saying here our address details are optional, so if you want to populate them, by all means you can. Let's say they're moving into the property, they're going to 271 Ocean View Lane. If you would like to put in their address at the time of transfer, you can use the Add Address button here. It is optional, so you'll still be able to proceed without it. Our consideration type. So these are the options provided by the Land Registry. So you will need to read through those and select the relevant one as applicable to your matter. In today's exercise, we're just doing a very stock standard transfer. So we'll say with monetary consideration. We'll put in the gross consideration amount. And the deposit paid, this is optional, but I'm going to put it in because it's going to flow through to the financial settlement area. The rest of this is a breakdown of the purchase price. This is data collection for the State Revenue Office. So if any of these things are applicable to your matter or relevant, then you would fill it in. If it's not applicable, you just leave it blank. So for a lot of our residential purchases, it is not going to be relevant. So I'm going to leave those ones blank, and I'll come down to the transaction information. These should be pretty familiar. Are the transferor and transferee related or associated at the date of the transfer? They're not, but if they were, you would say yes, and you would have to put in the market value. So if the circumstances are that at the moment in paper you were required to get a formal valuation completed on that property, well then that's what you still have to do if you're settling in PEXA, and you put in the market value and keep any valuation documents on your file. Were all the transferees named in the contract? They were, but if they were not, you would say no, and you'd say who wasn't named in the contract. Is this purchase a term sale? Yes or no? You just answer that one as applicable, and the operative words come straight from the land registry. So I'll just scroll to the top to show you that document one more time. Title details pulled through. This is not a part tenancy. The transferor details have pulled through. Our tenancy details are here, and we can select the tenancy type using this drop-down box. Our transferee details are here. Remembering, if we want to add in their addresses, we can do so using the Add Address button. We're selecting the consideration type and entering the relevant details as applicable to your matter. Okay, so I'm going to hit save on that document. I've populated all the necessary details, and we're now back on the document screen. We've got lodgement instructions. These are our covering letter. We have a transfer document in preparation, and we have a notice of sale as well. In preparation generally means, people, that there's work to be done. So we need to move our status forward, because if we're still in preparation, we're never going to be able to sign these documents. So the first thing that we want to do is edit this notice of sale. And the way that we edit or view anything is we use the action cogs on the right-hand side here. So I'll edit the notice of sale and essentially just fill in the missing details. So hopefully this should all look very familiar to you. I don't think it's asking you any questions that you haven't already seen before in the paper world. So select the nature of the property, the service of notice details. So you just need to select one of the parties, or you can select the owner's agent if you would like to, but you just need to select one. If the service of notice address is the same as the property address, you don't need to do anything, but if it's different, you can then add in the relevant service of notice address. Transaction details, so we're transferring the whole of the property, so we don't need to put in any shares here, and we're transferring it with vacant possession. The purchase price is pulled through from the transfer. There is no GST applicable, and we've got some questions here that we usually see. Does the purchase price include items which were not fixed improvements, yes or no? Does the purchase price include land not in the accompanying instrument, yes or no? Okay, so you would make those selections as applicable. Put in the contract to sale date. The settlement date has pulled through from the workspace, and we can put in our matter number or some sort of customer reference down the bottom here if we want to. Excellent. So what we can see here is that our notice of sale is now at prepared status. So we've moved that forward, which is excellent. Unfortunately, our transfer is still in preparation status, and we need to move that forward. And the only way that transfer is going to move forward is if we complete our stamp duty assessment. Before we move on to stamp duty, I might just pause there to see if anyone has any questions about creating the transfer, or editing the notice of sale?
We have a question come through. It's a really good question. So what if you have 4 purchasers, one couple as joint tenants and the other as joint tenants but as tenants in common in equal shares? Yes, that is very much possible on PEXA. We won't go through that just in this webinar at the moment because of the time restrictions, but just on the screen you can see the tenancy details. That's where you would put in those details, and it is in scope for PEXA, so you can definitely do those transactions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Cyber. We've got a few questions coming through about like different types of scenarios that you can do. And there's one that's coming through saying, can we transfer 50% from a proprietor on title to a new incoming purchaser? Yes, we can. So that's what we would call our part tenancy transfer. So that is available already. And I think we've got a question about the notice of sale. Does it need to be sent to the council? Cyber, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand it gets sent electronically to the Revenue Office or the Land Registry Office.
That's correct. So once the notice of sale has been generated and completed on PEXA, like we have on our screen, and once the settlement goes ahead, in addition to the transfer document being lodged, the notice of sale is simultaneously sent to the required council, so you wouldn't have to go outside of PEXA and do a paper NOS or go to the LRS website and do one. Everything is in this workspace.
And there's also a question just on that topic of the notice of sale. If you would like a copy of what you've actually populated, you can just action cog and view. And if you wanted to, you can just right click and select print and print that off or save it as a PDF. Excellent. So let's have a look at our flow chart because we've made some progress. We've prepared our transfer and we've edited our notice of sale. Now the next step is to complete our stamp duty through EDR. Our transfer will not move to a prepared status until we have completed stamp duty. So before you go into the EDR system, there is a reference number on this stamp duty screen that you need to access. This lodgement case ID is what you will be required to enter into your EDR assessment so that the two systems can be linked together. So you take note of your lodgement case ID and then you will log into EDR and complete your assessment in the usual manner. At the end of your assessment, you'll be given an OSR reference number and we need to enter in the OSR reference number into PEXA using this button, Enter Duty Information. So I'm going to pretend that I have completed my assessment. I have my OSR reference number and I'm plugging it in here. Now don't worry, if you're not signed up to EDR and you don't normally do your stamping, you usually use an agent, you can still continue to use an agent. You just need to give them the lodgement case ID so that they can go in and complete the assessment. Once they've completed it, they'll give you the reference number which you can then plug in here. So now that I've entered in that information, you can see that all the data from EDR has pulled through. So it's saying that my stamp duty verification result is successful. It tells me when stamp duty was verified, the stamp duty assessed amount, consideration, duty amount payable, and the payment status is currently unpaid. So I haven't elected to prepay it. I'm just going to pay it at settlement.
We're just going to stop there for a second. Sorry, Nicola. I know there's a question there as well, and I'd just like to address it with everyone else. So like Nicola mentioned, if you don't If you are not registered for EDR online, that's okay. You can still keep using your agent for stamping in New South Wales. The way that works is, again, really simple. So you send the required documents to your agent. They will still require this lodgement case ID, and you have to let them know that this is going to be a PEXA settlement. Once they've done the stamping, they will come back to you and give you the OSR reference number, and you just click on that, enter duty information, and enter the reference number. Now, I'm sure Nicola's going to go into this after this, but it is up to you if you want to pay the stamp duty at settlement, or you'd like to pay before the settlement date. If you are paying through an agent before the settlement date, please ensure you're allowing for at least 10 business days for OSR to receive that check and process the payment, because the agent is going to send it probably at the end of the week, and OSR needs time to bank that check and receive the payment into their system and tell PEXA that it has been paid. Nick, you can continue, Nick.
Yeah, some good tips there, Cyber. Thank you very much. Now we also just have a question about what is appearing on this screen right now. Don't worry guys, this is a training environment. It just returns a standard response every time I go and enter in duty information. So don't pay too much attention to the specific amount. This is a pretend environment. It's taking no notice of what the purchase price was, what details I've entered in. It just returns a standard response that looks like this every single time. When you do it in live, obviously, it's going to be drawing in real data from the EDR system. Okay, so we've completed our stamp duty assessment, and we've said that we haven't paid it, which means it will be paid at settlement. So automatically, a payment direction will be entered into the financial settlement schedule and paid direct to the OSR at settlement. And we'll be looking at that in just a second. Before we go any further, let's have a look at our document screen. We can see now that our documents are prepared and are prepared, so that's great. Our lodgement instructions are still in preparation though. I'm going to show you our flow chart because there are actually steps that the proprietor needs to complete. So we've completed our stamp duty assessment, which is here, but there's also an arrow coming over to the proprietor's side saying that they need to complete a consent document. So that's the pink box here. The consent document is the authorisation document required by the Land Registry in New South Wales, and a consent is always created by the party who is in control of the certificate of title. It's the way that they make the title available for this PEXA transaction. So to help you understand this concept of what a consent is, if you think about what happens in a paper settlement, when we go to attend the actual settlement on the day, the proprietor on title, or if there's a mortgagee on title, they usually bring the certificate of title to settlement and hand it over along with the transfer. In PEXA, we are not attending a physical settlement, so there's no way of them handing over the certificate of title. So essentially, a consent is the way that they make the title available. Instead of handing it over at settlement, they create a consent instead. Okay, so because this title is unencumbered, the proprietor on title has created this document. And what we're going to do is we're going to just assume that some time has passed in our transaction and the proprietor on title has come into the workspace and created this document for us. So I'm just going to take us to a workspace that I have prepared earlier, which shows this particular stage. Okay, so same parties, we've still got the Wakefields, we've still got Margaret and Maxwell Black, but the proprietors have come in and they've completed this consent document now. So that's how they make the title available for the PEXA transaction. So once they've completed their consent, we can see here that there is an arrow coming over back to our side, the incoming proprietor side, saying if you're the responsible subscriber, you need to edit the lodgement instructions. The responsible subscriber in PEXA is the lodging party. Because we're the incoming proprietor, we would usually be taking the documents down to the land registry and handing them over the counter. If there was an incoming mortgagee in the transaction, then it would be the incoming mortgagee. Because again, in the paper world, they are the ones that take the documents down and hand them over the counter. In our scenario, there is no incoming mortgagee, so it's the incoming proprietor who is the responsible subscriber. So we're going to edit the lodgement instructions and then proceed to view and sign all of our documents. Okay, so our lodgement instructions are here. To edit the lodgement instructions, we action cog and we select edit. And until this is completed, we won't see those lovely ticks that are appearing on the screen. So the operative words come straight from the land registry. The responsible subscriber is Whitehaven Conveyancing. Our reference number has pulled through and our order of lodgement is appearing here. So if there are multiple documents, you will be able to drag and drop them into the correct order for lodgement. When we hit the save button, it will send a message to the land registry to check the documents, and then the land registry will provide a response here saying successful or unsuccessful. And hot tip, our documents must be prepared and successful before we can proceed to sign them. So now that we are prepared and successful, let's have a look at our transfer. So remember, to view any documents, we action cog and we select view. We can review this document on the screen if we would like. Alternatively, we can right click and print it off to paper. If we realise that we've made an error and we need to correct something, we can action cog and edit. We also have the notice of sale, so we can action cog and view the notice of sale. Review the details on the screen, or like I said earlier, if you want to, you can right click and print and view it in paper format. Okay, so it's now time for signing. We've checked our documents and we're happy for them. The signature panel here is telling us how many signatures are required. So on the lodgement instructions, the only party who is required to sign the lodgement instructions is a responsible subscriber, i.e. the lodging party, and that is Whitehaven Conveyancing Services. So we need to sign that. There are 2 signatures required on the transfer, and we can see that Kakadu Property Law have already signed it because it's saying 1 of 2. So we need to get our signature onto that transfer as well. And 1 signature required on the notice of sale, well, that's for us to sign. So I'm going to pretend I have viewed my documents. I'm happy with them. They're now ready for signing. I insert my digital certificate into the computer and I can use any of these action cogs to select sign. So we've got some details just appearing at the top here, like our subscriber reference, the property address, the settlement date and time. It's showing us some of the destination line items that have already populated into the financial settlement schedule. So we can see here there's a check for stamp duty. But what we're going to worry about signing right now is not the financials, but the lodgement instructions, the transfer, and the notice of sale. And just read through and make sure that before you sign anything, you can comply with these certifications. So we need to make sure that the document is correct and compliant. We've retained any supporting evidence. We have a client authorization, and we've taken reasonable steps to verify the identity of our client. If we need to view that document again, we can just hit the view button and it'll take us to the document. When you're ready, you hit the Sign Documents button. And in the live system, it will appear with a pop-up box asking you to insert your PIN number. In training, it hasn't asked me for that because it's our training environment. Our documents are now verifying with the Land Registry, and they've come back with a status of signed. And we can see all the signatures in the signature panel have been filled out. So we can see who has actually signed the transfer and on what date and time. So now that all of our documents have been prepared and signed, my workspace summary screen shows the lodgement bar all the way at the ready status. So all documents have been completed, the Land Registry have given them the tick of approval, and they've been signed. Our financial settlement still needs a bit of work because we're still in preparation. So we're going to start working on that financial settlement now. So we've completed viewing and signing our documents. We're moving down to inputting destination funds and inputting source funds. This is all the financials. The settlement all happens here in this settlement tab. So I'll click on that settlement tab and we're in the settlement schedule. The settlement summary here summarises what's going on with the source funds and the adjustments and payments. Source funds refer to where is money coming from to facilitate this settlement. So where is the money coming from to pay for the transaction? In this scenario, we are paying in cash, so the funds will be coming from either our trust account, or if you do not have a trust account, the PEXA source account is an alternative. Adjustments and payments, where is the money going at settlement? So these are like our payment directions or our check directions. We can see at the top here that there is a adjustments calculator inbuilt into the PEXA system. So if you would like to, you can actually complete your adjustments in PEXA. So the details here of the parties have pulled through from the workspace, and I can see that some adjustments have already been entered in. These adjustments get calculated automatically, and then their details flow through into this statement of settlement. So the purchase price comes through from the transfer along with the deposit, balance of the purchase price less any adjustments, and then the balance due to the vendor. So I'll just show you quickly how you can use the add adjustments functionality here. So if you had another one that you had to enter in, you select the description. So let's say I'm going to put in land tax as an example. Treat it as paid or unpaid. So whatever it might be, I'll just say it's paid. Put in the date range applicable, so you'll know the dates that you need to enter in. The total period days will calculate. Put in the amount, and then it's going to calculate how much the purchaser owes, or if it was unpaid, how much the vendor owes. Hit the save button, and then that amount will then be recalculated again. So again, these details automatically flowing through here. And once you've entered in all of your adjustments, you can actually scroll to the top of the screen and use the download statement button to download a really nice looking statement of adjustments. Now this is completely optional. You do not need to use the adjustments calculator. So if you're quite comfortable using the current adjustments calculator that you have in your office, by all means you can continue to use that. This is purely optional. So you may just choose to completely ignore this if you want to. Like I said, it's an optional tool. You can use it or you do not have to use it. Excellent. So that's our adjustments calculator. It's optional. If you would like to use it, by all means, do so. Now, what is not optional, though, are our payment directions. And this is a little bit further down on the screen. So payment directions here are like our check directions. What do we need to get paid at settlement? We can see here that the vendor or the proprietor on title already has some line items entered. So they have a PEXA fee, which is auto-populated. They've entered in a water rates line item here. So obviously they're owing the water rates, and they've entered in their vendor funds. Further down, we can see our destination line item. So we're responsible for paying stamp duty. We're responsible for paying the lodgement fees, and we also have our own PEXA fee to pay as well. Now, assuming that we have other things to pay, we would add in destinations. So let's say I want to pay my professional fees. I go add destination, and in the category, I would select professional fees. Now, I know a question came up earlier about the foreign resident capital gains withholding. So if you need to pay that, you can see here that there's an option there of the category foreign resident capital gains withholding. So it's just another category, and you're just drawing a check for it. When you select that, it automatically populates the ATO's payment details. So you put in the amount and the reference number. So that's if you're paying foreign resident capital gains withholding tax. We're going to pay our professional fees, so we'll select professional fees. We'll put it into one of our accounts, so either our fee paying account, our trust account, or a completely different account, whichever you choose. Our fee paying account populates because we have already registered that with PEXA. Put in the amount and a payment description. So when the money comes into the account, how will our accounts team know what transaction or what client that relates to? Our final account details here are not relevant for practitioners. They are there for our financial institutions who have money coming into one big pot, and then they distribute the pot out into different accounts at the end of the day. So from a practitioner perspective, you can completely ignore the final account details. So once I've entered that in, I'll just scroll down to my payment directions to where it says the purchaser, and I can see my professional fees has populated. I'll just show you one more. Let's say we're going to pay the council rates, add destination. We can select council rates, or it might be body corporate fees, whatever it might be, GST withholding. So select the relevant category of what you need to pay. You can either pay it by BPay, which is nice and easy, so you can see you just put in the biller code and the reference number, or you can use bank transfer. So it's a little bit like online banking. You select the associated subscriber, which would be the other practitioner in the workspace representing the proprietor. They have an interest in ensuring that the payment is made. Put in the account name. So usually all these details are available on the statement. And I'm just giving you an example of how to enter these in. I'm not saying that the purchase would necessarily be the one to enter in the payment direction for council rates. I'm just showing you as a demonstration how you would do it. So essentially it's just like online banking, or filling in the details of where you want the money to go. Okay, and there's our council rates. So I'm going to pretend that we have completed all of our payment directions. We do not need to add in any more destinations. Okay, so we'll pretend for this example that all of our payments have been entered in, and that is the final amount that we need in order to settle this transaction. What we can see here is that the settlement summary is unbalanced because we have 0 source funds and $603,000 worth of payments. So we need to balance out the source funds. On the settlement summary, If you scroll down, you'll see an area called the settlement summary, source funds required to balance. This is the amount that we need to balance out our payment directions. So what we need to do is, if we have a trust account, we need to tell our clients to deposit the funds into our trust account at least 3 days before settlement so that it can be cleared in time. If you don't have a trust account, you will need to get the funds deposited into the PEXA source account. And again, it's 3 days before settlement. So in order to upload these source funds, we hit the source funds tab and then we select add a source. The category we will select is purchasers equity. It will default to the trust account if you have an integrated trust account. If you do not have an integrated trust account, it will default to PEXA source account. Put in the amount and your client name, a transaction description. So again, you might put in your matter number here. And the rest of these fields are optional and used mainly by the financial institutions so that they can reconcile funds. As a practitioner, you do not need to enter in these details. So just to show you again, we selected purchasers equity. If you have an integrated trust account, it will default to the trust account. If you don't have one, it will default to the PEXA source account. Enter in the amount, your client name, and a transaction description, and hit the save button. Now at this point in time, if you're using the PEXA source account, you will need to use the action cog here. And when you select the action cog, it will say download source account form. Now I can't show you this because in the training environment, it always shows that we have a trust account. So if you're using the source account, it will say download form. You'll need to download that form and it will have all the details in it that you need to give to your client, including the bank account details where they have to deposit funds into. Okay, so once you've given that to your client needs to get the funds deposited into the account, noted on that form, 3 days before settlement, so it's got time to clear. Now in our scenario, we're not using the source account, we're using our own trust account. So from this point in time, we've created a line item, but we've still got 2 more things that we need to complete. So we've input the source funds into PEXA, but we still need to verify that the funds are cleared and ready to be used for the settlement and authorize the debiting of those funds from the trust account at settlement. So I will complete those details now. To verify the funds, someone who has permission to do so clicks the action cog and selects verify funds. This box will pop up asking them to confirm that yes, the funds are cleared and available and will continue to be available for settlement. So if you've checked the trust account and that is all correct, you select yes. The last step of the process is to authorize the funds. So authorizing funds is a little bit like signing a trust check, and only trust signatories can complete this part of the process. So a trust signatory will have to insert their digital certificate into the computer before they complete this task, because that's how they're going to sign the check. So they insert the digital certificate, they select the action cog, and then authorize funds. It's going to show all of our checks that we've entered in, so all of our payment directions, so we can double check those. If they have permission to sign the settlement statement, they can sign that as well. Otherwise, someone else in the office who has permission to do so will complete that task. And then the trust account authorization. So remember, only a trust signatory can complete this step because it is akin to signing the trust check. So we're hereby authorizing the debiting of this amount from the trust account to be applied towards the destinations listed in the financial settlement schedule. And just important to note that nothing ever moves from the trust account until the workspace is locked. So once I can read through those and comply with all of my line items, I hit sign documents. I would put in my PIN, and we have now authorized the money from our trust account. So that status is now saying ready. Now, just to show you, that is the last step that the incoming proprietor needed to complete. But I just want to stay on the screen of the financial settlement schedule because there's an area that I want to show you. If there is an incoming mortgagee in the workspace, under the settlement summary, there is an area called funds confirmation. And this is very important if you have an incoming mortgagee. Total funds required to settle. So in this area here, and you can see there's a little question mark, this is where we tell the incoming mortgagee how much money we need to settle this transaction. And the amount that you enter in is calculated according to this information here. So it's the total funds as agreed by both the incoming proprietor and proprietor on title. It includes the adjusted balance of the purchase price, all registration fees, stamp duty, PEXA fees and professional fees. So just like in a normal paper transaction, you do your statement of adjustments and you work out how much your client needs to settle the transaction. Once you've done that, you enter it in here. And this is how we communicate to the bank, if there is an incoming mortgagee, how much money we need to settle this transaction. And we need to do this approximately 5 days before settlement if you can. The following area here is the area that the incoming mortgagee will complete. So they will tell you, it will say yes or no here, whether they have authority to debit from an existing account. So if there's a shortfall, they'll just tell you here, yes, they have authority to debit, or no, they do not. Okay, so this funds confirmation area is really the only area that you would need to complete if there's an incoming mortgagee. So we're now at the stage where our settlement summary is balanced, source funds are matching the payments, and all of the signatures are on the financial settlement schedule. Okay, now provided that everyone has signed their documents and their financial settlement schedule, the workspace will move to a ready status, and I'll just show you what that ready status looks like. So lodgement bar is at ready and the financial settlement bar is at ready as well. And at the scheduled date and time, these bars will start moving across. So the workspace will lock, documents will start lodging, and the settlement of funds will start moving across as well. So what I'm going to do is show you a quick video called What Happens at Settlement so that you can have a bit more of an understanding as what happens when these bars are moving across and turning green. Because it's all good to sit here looking at the screen, but it's even better to actually see visually what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've come into the PEXA community, so community.pexa.com.au, and I've come into the Help Centre and gone to Help Videos. And I'm going to select a video called What Happens at Settlement.
What happens at settlement in PEXA? Electronic settlement with PEXA is easy. This video will take a look at what happens at settlement time. The workspace starts in ready status. At settlement time, the workspace locks and the settlement status moves to settling. If a trust account is involved, PEXA sends a payment instruction file to the bank to move funds out of the trust account into the financial institution's internal account. Once the funds have been transferred, PEXA sends a funds reservation request to the RBA. Once the RBA receives the reservation, PEXA sends a lodgement request to the Land Registry, and the lodgement status moves to lodging. When lodgement is complete, the lodgement status moves to lodged. PEXA will send the settlement response to the RBA. Funds are then exchanged at RBA level. The financial settlement status then changes to settled. Next, disbursement of funds begins and the financial settlement status moves to disbursing. When the Land Registry has reviewed the documents, a final status is provided along with a dealing number against each document in the lodgement case. The lodgement status then moves to completed. When all the banks have returned disbursement responses, the financial settlement status moves to disbursed. And that's what happens at settlement time.
Excellent. So hopefully everyone was able to hear that video. So I'm just going to get out of that screen and then just come back here. Now we did have some questions coming through about the total funds required to settle. So I'll just go into the workspace and show you that. There's always a bit of confusion regarding total funds required to settle. So just let me get rid of this screen. So questions were coming through about this total funds required to settle area. So the question was, do we tell the bank how much we want them to contribute, or how much are we telling the bank how much we need in total to settle? So what you're doing is you're telling them in total, this is how much money we need to settle this transaction. So the way you calculate that is using this formula here. Even if your client is providing funds, it doesn't matter, you still tell them the total funds required to settle. They will then come in and tell you that if there's a shortfall, whether they have authority to provide for that shortfall. If the answer to that question is no, well then you know that you're going to need to get that money put into your trust account, and you'll need to then provide those funds at settlement in the way that we just showed you. Okay, so just confirming, the total funds required to settle is the total amount that the purchaser needs to come up with to pay for this whole transaction. It's not how much you're asking the bank to provide. So hopefully that's answered quite a few questions that came through. All right, we have got all the way to the end of our transfer and we've got our workspace to ready status. We are fast running out of time, so we are going to move on and just show you where you can get some further information post this webinar. The transfer guidelines, highly recommend you get familiar with the guidelines because they have been developed through industry-wide collaboration. The idea is that subscribers can work out what they need to complete and in what time frame, and also what do the other parties need to complete and in what time frame as well. These are available in our PEXA community, and I'll just quickly show you in the PEXA community where these are located. So I would encourage you to get familiar with the PEXA community because there really is a whole lot of useful information in here. And to find the transfer guidelines, just on the home page, all you need to do is scroll through until you see transfer guidelines. And from here, you can view the guidelines individually if you would like to. So if you're just looking at one particular one, you can just click on whichever one it is. Or alternatively, scroll to the bottom and download the PDF of the whole transfer guidelines. So I won't be going through those in details. We do have other webinars scheduled all about transfer guidelines, but I do encourage you to look at them if you're completing transfers. Bank transfer checklist. So if you are banking with the big four banks, so NAB, CBA, Westpac and ANZ, they have their own transfer checklists which will assist you in getting them the information that they need at the correct time. Again, you can access these via the PEXA community, and all you need to do is essentially type into the search area on any screen, bank transfer checklist, Okay, and you can see here we've got CBA, NAB, St. George. Okay, so if I just click on one of these to show you. And this is specifically for CBA. What do you need to do if you are acting for the purchase? How to initiate it? Okay. What time frames you need to do things in? Okay. All available from the PEXA community. The industry transformation timetable is the mandate timetable. So again, available from our PEXA community. Just go in there, search for industry transformation or mandate timetable, and it will bring up all the different states and the timeframes for when certain documents will become mandatory for lodging through the electronic network. Lastly, as we've already spoken about, the PEXA community. So this really is your one-stop shop for PEXA help and assistance. You can come in here and you can look at a whole lot of different materials. So if you like to read, you can read articles. If you would like to watch videos, you can select videos. If you want to practice transactions, you can go to PEXA Interactive Demos. If that's not to your liking, you can just search for anything that you want, PEXA related, in the search box, and a whole lot of information will come up. It's also a great way where you can ask questions if you're not finding what you're looking for, or raise an idea if you've got a cool idea. So we can see here all the things that people have been talking about in the PEXA community. Now remember, our webinars are always located on the left-hand panel here on the home page, PEXA webinars. So if you're interested in attending future webinars, come into this area and you can click New South Wales and have a look at the different webinars that we're running and register for any of those that tickle your fancy. We are out of time, so thank you so very much everyone for joining today's webinar. You've sent through some really great questions. We'll stay on the line and answer any other questions that we haven't got to already, but hopefully we have answered the majority of them online. After this session, you will receive a certificate of attendance from us, and if you would like to, you could possibly use that to further your CPD requirements. Remember, CPD is self-assessed in the jurisdiction of New South Wales. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We are logging off now. Have a great afternoon. Bye.